Chapter 11. Then Jehovah said to Moses and Aaron, "Tell the Israelites, these are the living creatures of the earth that you may eat. Every animal that has a split hoof and a cleft in its hooves, and that chews the cud, may be eaten. But you must not eat these animals that chew the cud or have a split hoof: the camel, which chews the cud but does not have a split hoof. It is unclean for you. Also the rock badger, because it chews the cud but does not have a split hoof. It is unclean for you. Also the hare, because it chews the cud but does not have a split hoof. It is unclean for you. Also the pig, because it has a split hoof and a cleft in the hoof, but does not chew the cud. It is unclean for you. You must not eat any of their flesh or touch their dead body. They are unclean for you. This is what you may eat of everything in the waters. Anything in the waters that has fins and scales, whether in the seas or in the rivers, it you may eat. But anything in the seas and in the rivers that has no fins and scales, among all the swarming creatures and of every other living creature that is in the waters, it is a loathsome thing for you. Yes, they should be loathsome to you, and you must not eat any of their flesh, and you must loathe their carcasses. Everything in the waters that has no fins and scales is a loathsome thing to you. These are the flying creatures that you are to loathe. They should not be eaten, for they are loathsome: the eagle, the osprey, the black vulture, the red kite, and every kind of black kite, every kind of raven, the ostrich, the owl, the gull, every kind of falcon, the little owl, the cormorant, the long-eared owl, the swan, the pelican, the vulture, the stork, every kind of heron, the hoopoe, and the bat. Every winged swarming creature that goes on all fours is something loathsome to you. Of the winged swarming creatures that move on all fours, you may eat only those that have jointed legs above their feet for leaping on the ground. Of these you may eat various kinds of migratory locusts, other edible locusts, crickets, and grasshoppers. All other winged swarming creatures with 4 legs are something loathsome to you. By these you would make yourselves unclean. Everyone touching their dead bodies will be unclean until the evening. Anyone carrying any of their dead bodies should wash his garments. He will be unclean until the evening. Any animal that has a split hoof but does not have a cleft and does not chew its cud is unclean to you. Everyone touching them will be unclean. Every living creature that walks on paws among the creatures that walk on all fours is unclean to you. Everyone touching their dead bodies will be unclean until the evening. The one who carries their dead bodies should wash his garments, and he will be unclean until the evening. They are unclean to you. These are the swarming creatures of the earth that are unclean to you: the mole rat, the mouse, every kind of lizard, the gecko, the large lizard, the newt, the sand lizard, and the chameleon. These swarming creatures are unclean to you. Everyone touching their dead bodies will be unclean until the evening. Now anything they fall on when they die will be unclean, whether a wooden utensil, a garment, a skin, or a piece of sackcloth. Any utensil that is used should be immersed in water, and it will be unclean until the evening. Then it will be clean. If they fall into an earthenware vessel, you are to smash it, and anything that was in it will be unclean. Any kind of food that comes in contact with water from such a vessel will be unclean, and any drinkable liquid in such a vessel will be unclean. Anything their dead bodies fall on will be unclean. Whether oven or small stove, it should be broken into pieces. They are unclean, and they will remain unclean to you. Only a spring and a cistern for storing water will continue clean, but anyone touching their dead bodies will be unclean. If their dead bodies fall on a plant seed that is to be sown, it is clean. But if water is put on a seed, and part of their dead body falls on it, the seed is unclean to you. Now, if an animal that you use for food dies, whoever touches its dead body will be unclean until the evening. Whoever eats any of its dead body should wash his garments, and he will be unclean until the evening. Whoever carries off its dead body should wash his garments, and he will be unclean until the evening. Every swarming creature of the earth is something loathsome. It must not be eaten. You must not eat any creature that crawls on its belly, any creature that goes on all fours, or any of earth's swarming creatures with a great number of legs, for they are something loathsome. Do not make yourselves loathsome by means of any swarming creature, and do not defile yourselves and become unclean by them. For I am Jehovah your God, and you must sanctify yourselves and become holy, because I am holy. So you must not make yourselves unclean by any swarming creature that moves on the earth. For I am Jehovah, who is leading you up out of the land of Egypt to prove myself God to you, and you must be holy, because I am holy. This is the law about the animals, the flying creatures, every living creature that moves through the waters, and concerning every creature that swarms on the earth, in order to make a distinction between the unclean and the clean, and between the living creatures that may be eaten and those that may not be eaten. Chapter 12. Jehovah went on to say to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, if a woman becomes pregnant and gives birth to a male, she will be unclean for 7 days, just as she is in the days of the impurity when she is menstruating. On the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin will be circumcised. She will continue cleansing herself from the blood for the next 33 days. She should not touch any holy thing, and she should not come into the holy place until she fulfills the days of her purification. If she should give birth to a female, she will then be unclean for 14 days, just as she would be during her menstruation. She will continue cleansing herself from the blood for the next 66 days. When the days of her purification for a son or a daughter are completed, she will bring a young ram in its first year for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering, to the entrance of the tent of meeting to the priest. He will present it before Jehovah and make atonement for her, and she will be clean from her flow of blood. This is the law about the woman who gives birth to either a male or a female. But if she cannot afford a sheep, she must then take 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, one for a burnt offering and one for a sin offering, and the priest will make atonement for her, and she will be clean." Chapter 13. Jehovah continued to speak to Moses and Aaron, saying, "If a man develops on his skin a swelling, a scab, or a blotch, and it could become the disease of leprosy on his skin, he must then be brought to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons the priests. The priest will examine the infection on his skin. When the hair in the infection has turned white, and the appearance of the infection is deeper than the skin, it is the disease of leprosy. The priest will examine it and declare him unclean. But if the blotch on his skin is white, and its appearance is not deeper than the skin, and the hair has not turned white, the priest will then quarantine the infected person for 7 days. The priest will then examine him on the 7th day, and if it appears that the infection has stopped and has not spread on the skin, the priest will quarantine him for another 7 days. The priest should examine him again on the 7th day, and if the infection has faded and has not spread in the skin, the priest will declare him clean. It was only a scab. The man will then wash his garments and be clean. But if the scab has definitely spread on the skin after he appears before the priest to establish his purification, he will then appear again before the priest. The priest will examine it, and if the scab has spread in the skin, the priest will then declare him unclean. It is leprosy. If the disease of leprosy develops in a man, he must then be brought to the priest, and the priest will examine him. If there is a white swelling on the skin, and it has turned the hair white, and there is an open sore in the swelling, it is chronic leprosy on his skin, and the priest will declare him unclean. He should not quarantine him, for he is unclean. Now, if the leprosy breaks out all over the skin, and the leprosy covers the person with the disease from head to foot, as far as the priest can see, and the priest has examined him, and sees that the leprosy has covered all his skin, he will then declare the infected person clean. All of it has turned white, and he is clean. But whenever an open sore appears in it, he will be unclean. When the priest sees the open sore, he will declare him unclean. The open sore is unclean. It is leprosy. But if the open sore again turns white, he will then come to the priest. The priest will examine him, and if the infection has turned white, the priest will then declare the infected person clean. He is clean. If a person develops a boil on his skin, and it heals, but in the place of the boil, a white swelling or a reddish-white blotch has developed, he must then show himself to the priest. The priest will examine it, and if it appears to be deeper than the skin, and its hair has turned white, the priest will then declare him unclean. It is the disease of leprosy that has broken out in the boil. But if the priest examines it, and sees that there is no white hair in it, and it is not deeper than the skin, and appears faded, the priest will then quarantine him for 7 days. And if it has clearly spread on the skin, the priest will then declare him unclean. It is a disease. But if the blotch stays in one place and has not spread, it is only the inflammation from the boil, and the priest will declare him clean. Or if someone has a scar from the fire, and the raw flesh of the scar becomes a reddish-white blotch or a white one, the priest will then examine it. If the hair in the blotch has turned white, and it appears to be deeper than the skin, it is leprosy that has broken out in the scar, and the priest will declare him unclean. It is the disease of leprosy. But if the priest examines it and sees that there is no white hair in the blotch, and it is not deeper than the skin, and it is faded, the priest will then quarantine him for 7 days. The priest will examine him on the 7th day, and if it has clearly spread on the skin, the priest will then declare him unclean. It is the disease of leprosy. But if the blotch stays in one place and has not spread over the skin, and it is faded, it is only a swelling of the scar, and the priest will declare him clean, because it is an inflammation of the scar. When a man or a woman develops an infection on the head or on the chin, the priest will then examine the infection. If it appears to be deeper than the skin, and the hair is yellow and thin, the priest will then declare such one unclean. It is an infection of the scalp or the beard. It is leprosy of the head or of the chin. But if the priest sees that the infection does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and there is no black hair in it, the priest should quarantine the infected person for 7 days. The priest will examine the infection on the 7th day, and if the infected area has not spread, and no yellow hair has developed in it, and the appearance of the infected area is not deeper than the skin, the person should have himself shaved, but he will not have the infected area shaved. Then the priest will quarantine the infected person for 7 days. The priest will again examine the infected area on the 7th day, and if the infection of the scalp and beard has not spread on the skin, and it does not appear deeper than the skin, the priest must then declare him clean, and he should wash his garments and be clean. But if the infection clearly spreads on the skin after his purification, the priest will examine him, and if the infection has spread on the skin, the priest does not need to look for yellow hair. That person is unclean. But if the examination shows that the infection has not spread, and black hair has grown on it, the infection has been healed. He is clean, and the priest will declare him clean. If a man or a woman develops blotches on the skin, and the blotches are white, the priest will examine them. If the skin blotches are faded white, it is a harmless rash that has broken out on the skin. That person is clean. If a man loses the hair of his head and becomes bald, he is clean. If he loses the hair on the front of his head and becomes bald there, he is clean. But if a reddish-white sore develops on the bald part of his scalp or on his forehead, it is leprosy breaking out on his scalp or on his forehead. The priest will examine him, and if the swelling from the infection is reddish-white on the bald spot on top of his head or on his forehead, and it looks like leprosy on his skin, he is a leper. He is unclean, and the priest should declare him unclean because of the disease on his head. As for the leper who has the disease, his garments should be torn, and his head should be left ungroomed, and he should cover over his moustache and call out, "Unclean, unclean." He will be unclean the whole time that he has the disease. Since he is unclean, he should live in isolation. His dwelling place will be outside the camp. If the disease of leprosy contaminates a garment, whether a woolen or a linen garment, either in the warp or in the woof of the linen or of the wool, or in a skin, or in anything made of skin, and the yellowish-green or reddish stain from the disease contaminates the garment, a skin, the warp, the woof, or any article of skin, it is a contamination from leprosy, and it should be shown to the priest. The priest will examine the disease, and he must quarantine the disease for 7 days. When he examines the disease on the 7th day and sees that it has spread in the garment, in the warp, in the woof, or in the skin, regardless of what the skin is used for, the disease is malignant leprosy, and it is unclean. He should burn the garment, or the warp, or the woof in the wool, or in the linen, or any article of skin in which the disease has developed, for it is malignant leprosy. It should be burned in the fire. But if the priest examines it, and the disease has not spread in the garment, or in the warp, or in the woof, or in any article of skin, the priest will then command that they should wash the contaminated item, and he will quarantine it for another 7 days. The priest will then examine the contaminated item after it has been thoroughly washed. If the appearance of the contamination has not changed, even if the disease has not spread, it is unclean. You should burn it in the fire because it has been eaten away, either from its underside or from its outside. But if the priest has examined it, and the contaminated part is faded after it has been thoroughly washed, he will then tear it out of the garment, or the skin, or the warp, or the woof. However, if it still appears in another part of the garment, or in the warp, or in the woof, or in any article of skin, it is spreading, and you should burn any contaminated item in the fire. But when the contamination disappears from the garment, or the warp, or the woof, or any article of skin that you wash, it should then be washed a second time, and it will be clean. This is the law of the disease of leprosy in a garment, of wool or of linen, or in the warp or in the woof, or in any article of skin, for declaring it clean or unclean. Chapter 14. Jehovah continued to speak to Moses, saying, "This is to be the law of the leper on the day his purification is established, when he is to be brought to the priest. The priest will go outside the camp and examine him. If the leper has been cured of the leprosy, the priest will command him to bring 2 live clean birds, cedar wood, scarlet material, and hyssop for his cleansing. The priest will command that the one bird be killed in an earthenware vessel over running water. But he should take the living bird, along with the cedar wood, the scarlet material, and the hyssop, and dip them together in the blood of the bird that was killed over the running water. Then he will spatter it 7 times on the one cleansing himself from the leprosy, and declare him clean, and he will set the living bird free in the open field. The one cleansing himself must wash his garments and shave off all his hair and bathe in water, and he will be clean. Afterward he may come into the camp, but he will dwell outside his tent for 7 days. On the 7th day he should shave off all the hair on his head and his chin and his eyebrows. After he shaves off all his hair, he will wash his garments and bathe himself in water, and he will be clean. On the 8th day he will take 2 sound young rams, 1 sound female lamb in its first year, 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering, and 1 log measure of oil. And the priest who declares him clean will present the man who is cleansing himself, along with the offerings, before Jehovah, at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest will take the 1 young ram and offer it as a guilt offering, together with the log measure of oil, and he will wave them back and forth as a wave offering before Jehovah. Then he will slaughter the young ram in the place where the sin offering and the burnt offering are usually slaughtered, in a holy place, because, like the sin offering, the guilt offering belongs to the priest. It is something most holy. Then the priest will take some of the blood of the guilt offering, and the priest will put it on the right earlobe of the one cleansing himself, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. And the priest will take some of the log measure of oil and pour it into his own left palm. The priest will then dip his right finger into the oil that is in his left palm, and spatter some of the oil with his finger 7 times before Jehovah. Then the priest will put some of the remaining oil in his palm on the right earlobe of the one cleansing himself, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, over the blood of the guilt offering. The priest will put what is left over of the oil in his palm on the head of the one cleansing himself, and the priest will make atonement for him before Jehovah. The priest will sacrifice the sin offering and make atonement for the one cleansing himself from his impurity, and afterward he will slaughter the burnt offering. And the priest will offer up the burnt offering and the grain offering on the altar, and the priest will make atonement for him, and he will be clean. However, if he is poor and does not have enough means, he will then take 1 young ram as a guilt offering for a wave offering in order to make atonement for himself, along with 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering, a log measure of oil, and 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, according to his means. The one will serve as a sin offering, and the other as a burnt offering. On the 8th day, he will bring them for establishing his purification to the priest, at the entrance of the tent of meeting before Jehovah. The priest will take the young ram of the guilt offering and the log measure of oil, and the priest will wave them back and forth as a wave offering before Jehovah. He will then slaughter the young ram of the guilt offering, and the priest will take some of the blood of the guilt offering and put it on the right earlobe of the one cleansing himself, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. The priest will pour some of the oil into his own left palm, and he will then spatter with his right finger some of the oil that is in his left palm 7 times before Jehovah. And the priest will put some of the oil that is in his palm on the right earlobe of the one cleansing himself, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, on the same places that he put the blood of the guilt offering. The priest will then put what is left over of the oil in his palm on the head of the one cleansing himself, in order to make atonement for him before Jehovah. He will offer up 1 of the turtle doves, or 1 of the young pigeons, according to his means, the one he can afford, as a sin offering, and the other as a burnt offering along with the grain offering, and the priest will make atonement for the one cleansing himself before Jehovah. This is the law for the one in whom the disease of leprosy was, but who does not have the means when establishing his purification. Then Jehovah said to Moses and Aaron, "When you come into the land of Canaan, which I am giving you as a possession, and I contaminate a house in your land with the disease of leprosy, the one to whom the house belongs should then come and tell the priest, "Some kind of contamination has appeared in my house." The priest will give orders to clear out the house before he comes to examine the contamination, in order that he may not declare everything that is in the house unclean. And after that, the priest will come in to inspect the house. He will examine the affected area, and if the walls of the house are contaminated with yellowish-green or reddish depressions, and they appear to be deeper than the wall surface, the priest will then go out of the house to the entryway of the house and quarantine the house for 7 days. Then the priest will return on the 7th day and make an inspection. If the contamination has spread in the walls of the house, the priest will then give orders, and the contaminated stones must be torn out and thrown outside the city into an unclean place. Then he is to have the inside of the house thoroughly scraped, and the plaster and mortar that is removed should be discarded outside the city in an unclean place. They will then insert other stones in the place of the stones they removed, and he should use different mortar and have the house plastered. If, though, the contamination returns and breaks out in the house after the stones were torn out and the house was scraped and replastered, the priest will then go in and inspect it. If the contamination has spread in the house, it is malignant leprosy in the house. The house is unclean. He will then have the house pulled down, its stones, its timbers, and all the plaster and mortar of the house, and carried outside the city to an unclean place. But whoever enters the house any of the days it is quarantined will be unclean until the evening. And whoever lies down in the house should wash his garments, and whoever eats in the house should wash his garments. However, if the priest comes and sees that the contamination has not spread in the house after the house was replastered, the priest will then declare the house clean, because the contamination has been healed. In order to purify the house from uncleanness, he will take 2 birds, cedar wood, scarlet material, and hyssop. He is to kill the one bird in an earthenware vessel over running water. Then he will take the cedar wood, the hyssop, the scarlet material, and the live bird, and dip them in the blood of the bird that was killed, and in the running water. And he must spatter it toward the house 7 times. And he will purify the house from uncleanness with the blood of the bird, the running water, the live bird, the cedar wood, the hyssop, and the scarlet material. He will then set the live bird free outside the city in the open field, and make atonement for the house, and it will be clean. This is the law respecting any case of leprosy, infection of the scalp or the beard, leprosy of the garment or the house, and respecting swellings, scabs, and blotches, in order to determine when something is unclean and when something is clean. This is the law about leprosy. Chapter 15. Jehovah continued to speak to Moses and Aaron, saying, "Speak to the Israelites and tell them, if a man has a discharge from his genital organ, this discharge makes him unclean. He is unclean from the discharge, whether the discharge continues to flow from his genitals or is obstructed. He is still unclean. Any bed that the one with the discharge lies on will be unclean, and anything he sits on will be unclean. A man who touches his bed must wash his garments, and he should bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. Anyone who sits on an article that the one having a discharge sat on should wash his garments, bathe in water, and be unclean until the evening. Whoever touches the flesh of the one having a discharge should wash his garments, bathe in water, and be unclean until the evening. If the one who has a discharge spits on someone clean, that person must wash his garments, bathe in water, and be unclean until the evening. Any saddle that the one with the discharge rides on will be unclean. Anyone touching anything that was under him will be unclean until the evening, and anyone who carries those items will wash his garments, bathe in water, and be unclean until the evening. If the one with the discharge has not washed his hands in water, and he touches someone, that person must then wash his garments, bathe in water, and be unclean until the evening. An earthenware vessel that the one having a discharge touches should be smashed, and any wooden vessel should be washed with water. When the discharge stops and the person becomes clean from it, he will then count 7 days for his purification, and he must wash his garments, bathe himself in running water, and he will be clean. On the 8th day, he should take 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons and come before Jehovah at the entrance of the tent of meeting and give them to the priest. And the priest will offer them, the one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering. And the priest will make atonement for him before Jehovah concerning his discharge. Now, if a man has an emission of semen, he should bathe his whole body in water and be unclean until the evening. He must wash with water any garment and any skin with semen on it, and it will be unclean until the evening. When a man lies with a woman and has an emission of semen, they should bathe in water and be unclean until the evening. If a woman has a discharge of blood from her body, she will continue in her menstrual impurity for 7 days. Anyone touching her will be unclean until the evening. Anything she lies down on in her menstrual impurity will be unclean, and everything she sits on will be unclean. Anyone touching her bed should wash his garments, bathe in water, and be unclean until the evening. Anyone touching any article she sat on should wash his garments, bathe in water, and be unclean until the evening. If she sat on the bed or on another article, his touching it will make him unclean until the evening. And if a man lies down with her, and her menstrual impurity comes on him, he will then be unclean for 7 days, and any bed on which he lies down will be unclean. When a woman's discharge of blood flows for many days, when it is not the regular time of her menstruation, or if she should have a flow longer than her usual menstruation, she will be unclean during all the days of her discharge, as in the days of her menstrual impurity. Any bed she lies on during the days of her discharge will become like the bed of her menstrual impurity, and any article she sits on will become unclean, like the uncleanness of her menstrual impurity. Anyone touching them will be unclean, and he must wash his garments, bathe in water, and be unclean until the evening. However, when she is clean from her discharge, she will count for herself 7 days, and afterward she will be clean. On the 8th day, she should take 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and she will bring them to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest will make the one a sin offering, and the other a burnt offering, and the priest will make atonement for her before Jehovah concerning her unclean discharge. Thus you must keep the Israelites separate from their uncleanness, so that they do not die in their uncleanness by defiling my tabernacle which is in their midst. This is the law about the man having a discharge, the man who is unclean because of an emission of semen, the woman during her menstrual impurity, any male or female who has a discharge flowing from the body, and a man who lies down with an unclean woman.